Georgie, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Kiet, wonderful to see you.
Sam here. It's been a bit of time. I was sick the last time. We had to skip. But what's funny is, when you're in great health, you want a million things. When you're sick, you only want one thing, right? That's just showcase the importance of health that we sometimes don't appreciate.
And it was interesting. You were saying how you've really been knocked sideways, and I shared that I think it's often when we have young children, we seem to as adults get a really intense version of what they bounce back after a day, and for adults, I think it can take that much longer to kind of get over whatever virus it is. And my coach once said to me, the importance of you've got to put the credits into the health bank account. You can't just take them out when you get sick. And so I think it's for all of us, making sure that we're putting ourselves in the best possible place to bounce back when the inevitable bugs and viruses and whatever come knocking.
No, exactly. And look, we come from the finance world. In derivatives, we talk about data, time decay. Sometimes we don't realize there's a time decay to everything, right? From health to relationship to just in general. And it's about how we appreciate those things around us and how we effectively cultivate that from that perspective.
Do you know what? We use the word appreciate there, and I think it's such an important word to underscore because there's so much to be appreciative of, and I think it's very easy to find ourselves in that constant doing. It's a little bit like the other day. I was driving my children to school, and we had to stop. There was a bit of a traffic jam, and I suddenly noticed a house that was beautiful. I'm like, I drive this route to school every day. Like every day, I go past the same house. Yeah, I'd never noticed it because I was looking ahead, looking forward, purposeful, wanted to get to school on time. And I think that really struck me as that overlays many aspects of our life. There can be so many things of beauty, of wonder, of specialness around us, and yet we don't always slow down to take the time to appreciate them.
No, it is. And we've touched on this about, what drives human consciousness, right? And I think, to me, my definition is two things: is attention, right? Having the attention to understand what's happening around you and your feelings, the people, everything around you, and appreciating it. And then two is intention, understanding the intentions and clarity, what you want to achieve or accomplish. And together is what really will form consciousness, right? To me, I call it AIA. So attention, intention, and actions. Right, actions that are aligned to our attention and intention, and we don't always have that clarity, right?
And there was I don't know where I read it a while ago about the importance of intention. You need to be very intentional, and then it has to be backed up by action. And the story that struck me listening to you there was, if you were wanting to go to the States. You wouldn't just be, I want to go to the States. There's a specificity to the intention. I want to go to New York. I want to travel on the 30th of May. I want to leave at 2:00. I want to arrive in this terminal. Sometimes I think our intentions can be very vague. I want to travel to the States. Well, that's, so it is about that specificity of intention, which then backed up by action, enables you to arrive at your destination, or whether it's your goal, achieving the goal, what you want, in the timeline that you're setting yourself.
No, and a lot of times, why that intention matters, clarity matters is, we may have goals that are hard to achieve where we may not see the results up front. And because we don't understand the why and the driver, we tend to give up, right? So that's why it's important to really have that clarity, to your point, to say, okay, I'm going to this location and here's why. Right, it may be a pain in the butt because I need to get a train, a bus, I need to bicycle, whatever the case may be to get there. But you know what? I'm gonna get there because I know my why, right? I know my intention.
And you said there about goals taking time, and that is such an important one to underscore. I sometimes see people giving up on their goals because they're not seeing the results. Results take time, and I think we live in a world where I see my children where they're 14 and 12. They want everything immediately because that's how they've been calibrated. They want to watch something on TV. they go to their stream. I had 4 channels growing up where everything was scheduled. You get the daily newspaper, which would tell you what you could watch at a specific time. And they want to buy something. It's on Amazon. It's, Amazon Prime within 24 hours. So they haven't got an appreciation of waiting, of time. And I can't remember what the quote is around bamboo. Is it 2 years or 8 years? There's something about that how long bamboo, takes for the shoots to show above the surface. And the same is true of change. It's about putting all those practices and taking those actions. And sometimes the results are not immediately visible, but it doesn't mean things are not brewing to really, in the case of bamboo, to really shoot up and reach for those skies.
No, right on. So that goes to the core topic of the show, which, and you rightly highlighted, for us to achieve our goal and what we want in life, there's things beyond EQ and IQ. There's a lot of set of toolings. So why don't you tell the audience on all the cues that you have in mind to educate us?
I'll bring you my phone because it was my husband's 50th birthday last week, and I sat next to my husband and I met at work, and I sat many years ago I sat next to an old colleague, and we were talking about emotional intelligence, how important that is for leaders, reality testing, impulse control, empathy, and then there's the obvious IQ. I think table stakes are about being smart, but he had loads more cues that I were new to me. So I've got them here that I said I'd share with you. So we have AQ, which I thought was about the adaptability quotient, but for him it's about attitude. So your attitude, what you bring into the room. And I thought, well, that's interesting because attitude is something that's very much within our control, and an attitude is infectious. If I come in abrasive, irritated and annoyed, well, then chances are that's going to trigger something in you. Equally, I can come in with a positive, open, empathetic attitude, and again, that same thing is infectious, but for all the right reasons. So at AQ, I'll go through them and then you tell me what one strikes you. Then he had LQ, which is about likability, your likability quotient. Then there was GQ, which was your generosity of time and resources. There was MQ, which is about your meaning quotient, able to understand the why purpose, so how you kind of communicate that out. And then CQ, communication quotient. And he attributed a lady called Pinky Liani, who I'm not sure, I think she's involved in Women in the Future, but there were a lot of cues there. So what one strikes a chord for you?
I think I love to start with AQ because I think how you get anything done starts with your attitude. And it's not about even your attitude and how you deal with others, it's your attitude around how you deal with yourself first, right? Like, it's funny, I tell my kids, I'm like, look, there's only one person you're going to spend most of your life with. It's not by choice, right? And you got to learn how to spend your life with that person, and you got to learn how to like that person. You got to learn how to communicate, and that's yourself, right? And it all starts with, the attitude you give yourself, the attitude and mindset you bring, because it starts there. Like, it's funny, when I was climbing up the ranks, I always thought, the right thing to do is to, no matter whatever mood you are, put on a fake face and just communicate well, right? And what I realized was, he was like, Kiet, you're not authentic. I'm like, yeah, I'm not authentic. I'm pissed off. This thing is dumb, etc. And I realized I had the wrong attitude. I internalized the wrong mindset. So it wasn't really about how I communicate. It's really starts with how I internalize my attitude, so that no matter what the situation is, I am communicating as a leader. Right? And it starts with inside before it goes outside. So curious to hear your thoughts about that.
Yeah, and I I love that. The one person you're going to spend the most amount of time with is in fact yourself, which probably leads to the LQ, likability. You've got to like yourself if you're going to spend so much time with yourself. I think attitude is so important, and if we talk about change, that's part of our show. Change is omnipresent. Change for many of us is acute, it's exponential. We can't always control the events surrounding us. Equally, we can't control the attitudes of people around us. We can control our attitudes. And a quote I once heard was that, the situation could be a C-, your response, your attitude can be an A+. That is within your gift. it speaks to the word you shared earlier about intentionality. You know, be intentional around the attitude you want to bring into the room before you walk into a meeting, before you join a call. You know, how do I want people to feel in this call? Knowing that, how do I need to be? What is the attitude I need to bring in? And an attitude isn't just words. It's not just the words you speak. It's your tone. It's your pace. It's your non-verbals. It's your silent messaging. Your silent messaging gives us as much information and insight around how you're feeling as does the actual words that you speak.
No, totally agree. And I I also believe that it's important to have real attitude, not fake attitude, to your point, right? Is to say you need to internalize it first and have the right attitude. And I think part of the challenge with attitude sometimes is, and I'm not sure if you agree or not, is we always come with a set of expectations. And so our attitude fluctuates depending on how the reality is versus our expectation. And in a way, I think it's driven from a lack of gratitude. Because any situation you go in, you have a sense of gratitude and you have low expectations, right? And you just bring your best foot forward, you tend to have a better attitude. Versus if you go in with high expectation, it doesn't go your way, all of a sudden your attitude gets bad, right?
And do you know what? With my children, they're at school. The one thing I'd be really disappointed with is if their teacher said to them, do you know what? They're really top performers, but their attitude sucks. That would be, anything about attitude, because I'm like, you know what? There's no excuses for not bringing a good attitude. But you can have a bad day and you might be a little bit more irritable, a little bit more withdrawn. Just, there's a lot going on. But to have a consistently bad attitude, to me, that's not okay in work. Just as much as it's not okay for me, even my children at school, but people that who work for me, it's like, no, there's. And look, and I think sometimes if you are leading people, it's understanding what is the catalyst behind the bad attitude. Like, is there something? I think always for leaders, there's an opportunity to do an accusation audit and hold the mirror up. How might I have contributed to this situation? Is there anything I did, said, or didn't say, should have said that has contributed to that? But ultimately, it does sit with the individual. And I wanted to circle back to what you said about authenticity, because if you try and have when people are try and fake, let's say, praise or fake that it's not genuine, I think that's worse than anything, because people can read through that. And so I think it's being authentic. It is about being true to yourself and recognizing as a leader, it is about being authentic with more skill, recognizing what are the levers you've got available to you and where do you need to dial things up or down. But I've seen leaders before who've given compliments or just, again, and it's so inauthentic. And to me, there's certain things that grate me. That is one of them.
1,000%. Maybe there should be an authenticity quotient, right? In terms of now, how does that drive likability? Like, you think it's interrelated?
Yeah, and do you know what? I asked a leader recently. I said, "Can you be nice and still be a really impactful leader?" And because we explored that, because I think as human beings we have a desire to be liked. We're social creatures, we're pack animals, and if you go back hundreds of thousands of years, if you weren't in the pack, then you risk, your chances of survival were at stake. And so I think there is, and this is a belief of mine, so this might not be a universal truth. There is a fundamental desire to want to be liked. However, when you are leaders of teams and organizations, it comes with the territory. You're not always going to be liked, because you're going to make the tough decisions that are in service of shareholder value, in service of the company why, the mission statement. And not everyone's going to like those decisions. But I think there's something about not like, the decision not being liked versus you not being liked. And maybe it's not about being liked, it's about being respected. But I think we all want to work, and I'm making an assumption here, I think most people want to work for organizations where they do like the leader. They, whether it's because they're a great storyteller or they're engaging or they're just very motivational. Like to me, likability, and I said it could be a very personal thing. I want to work alongside and partner with people that I like, because we talked about time decaying earlier. Time's short. We've got one journey on this planet, and so I want to be around people who are springboards, not anchors.
No, exactly. And I think you raised a good point. That is, when you're a new manager, you try to please everybody because you think your job is to please everybody, right? And it's always, in a way, you're kind of harming the team and harming the situation. And it's really about making fair, tough decisions and being able to have fair, tough conversations. And believe it or not, by doing that, you actually get respect from the team. And it will actually increase your likability, because people say, well, this individual is fair, right? And this individual is helping me grow. Because if all you say to your team is say, oh, you guys are amazing, you guys, why do they need you, right?
Yeah.
There must be aspects that they can improve on, that you as a leader can help. They may have blind spots, and it's our job as leaders to showcase and share that blind spot and not be afraid to have tough conversations, right?
The word you mentioned there is an important one to underline, which is fair. I think it's interesting. When I speak to leaders, often I'm like, what do you want to be known for? And fairness is often a word that comes up, because that, to me, fairness links to integrity. It links to doing the right thing. It links to being a good human being. So I think that word fair, you can make the tough decisions and be fair at the same time.
Agreed. Okay, so let's jump to the meaning quotient. So how do you build on that? How do you build on meaning?
And so meaning, he had able to understand the why and the purpose. This, for me, really links to Simon Sinek. And if people haven't seen his TED Talk, or he's got a great mini clip on YouTube about the power of the why. When I look at leaders where their people aren't fully, they're enrolled, but are they fully enrolled? It's where they don't fully understand the why. I think highly effective leaders are also very good storytellers. They can bring the vision and mission to life in a way that's compelling, and in a way that wherever I sit in the organization, I understand how my role contributes to that overall why. And I think the what and the how comes after the why, but often leaders start with the what and how. We're leading with the why. The meaning, that's emotional. That gets people's kind of, it connects people in a different way.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I guess there's many whys, right, in terms of our life, right? Why in terms of our personal life, our professional life. But how do you get clarity on what your why is and what my why? Like, we each have a different why. Like how do you dig deep for that?
When I had my burnout many years ago, which actually was a health challenge, but also a bigger savior, because it gave me time to reflect on what I wanted to do, because I'd kind of fallen out of love with my old role. And that's when I set up my own business. And I remember one of the first questions my coach asked me was, who are you? And I was like, it's a really, really strange question. I'm like, well, I'm Georgie, I'm a mother of two. I've got, I work in the city. She said, but who are you? And I was like, I'm a wife of Simon. And she said, no, but who are you? And she kept coming back to that question. I'm like, I really don't understand the question, because I feel like I'm answering it in a very, I feel like I'm answering the question yet. And what that really came back to was about values. It was like, who are you? What do you care about? What matters to you? What brings you alive? What ignites you at kind of a soul and spirit level? And I hadn't really given any thought to that before, because I've been so busy in being a human doing and producing and being in that constant throughput. So I think your why comes from, and our why changes. It's not it evolves. We evolve, the world's evolving around us, so does our why. And it is about having a mini board meeting with yourself periodically, at least once a quarter. I'd suggest once a month, just to check in on your why. What do I care about? What matters to me? What's the success that I want to be achieving in several years? And what's the purpose of that? Like, what would it give me? Because purpose is everything. Like, when we connect to our purpose, like our true purpose, that's when like we can move heaven and earth to make things happen. So the who am I think is a very, very good starting question. Yeah, and it's sometimes you need to ask more questions to dig around. Like, what do I care about? What matters to me? What ignites me? Your body, your inner kind of compass will give you those physiological responses when you experience something that really sparks you in a really interesting way.
And so you need a lot of tough self-talk, right? Like, and I don't know if people do that. Like, do you have self-talk? Like, at times you say, "Okay, Georgie, we're gonna have a one-on-one with each other and understand, what's going on here."
Yeah, yes, and I'll say so. Yes, I do. I journal regularly. I have coaches again who hold the mirror up, which I suppose that's not one-on-one, but I journal regularly because for me that's a very cathartic way of just being able to express, bringing some more of my subconscious into my conscious, and I find it really interesting sometimes what comes out as I journal. Equally, I have a trusted tribe around me. Some people refer to it as their internal board of directors, the same way as a S&P Global or a Coca-Cola have a board of directors. As human beings, it doesn't matter what level of an organization you are, you still need people around you. You can't be totally objective when it comes to you. You don't know your blind spots. Blind spots are blind for a reason. And sometimes we can be the harshest critics of ourselves. Sometimes we could be too compassionate. So it's then when you have those people around you who can be the accountability partners, who can be the checks and balance, who can be the truth tellers, who can be the challengers, the champions, who can, or equally just be the place where you need to go and vent sometimes. But I think we can see ourselves when we look in the mirror, but we can't truly see ourselves. There's going to be certain aspects of ourselves that are, untapped potential. Can we see that in ourselves? Maybe not. There's sometimes you go through your careers and a leader will identify you for an opportunity and you're like, God, I'm not ready. But they can see the qualities in you. They can see your growth engine. They're like, they are so capable. Hence, people around us, and it's the who and what's the hat you need them to wear, I think is really, it's a critical key to success.
No, I totally agree. And it's funny, matter of fact, we're never ready for any opportunity we have, right? Like any promotion, any new engagement, like everything we do, there's always a first time.
Yeah.
There's always a first. It's just reality. Anything we do, there's always a first. And we need to understand that.
And we often can find ourselves waiting to feel confident before we put ourselves out for the opportunity. But confidence isn't a prerequisite. It's a function of taking action. So it's a bit like, whether it's, again, skydive, doing a marathon, whatever it may be, if you wait for the right time, having children. I remember vividly one of my managers before I had Alfred, my oldest, he's like, don't ever wait for the perfect time to have children. Like, yes, there's a period of readiness, i.e. you've got a security, a partner. So there's not everyone have a partner, but there's an element of that, but don't ever wait for the perfect time, because actually the perfect time is now. Like that's it is about the getting started. That's where the momentum, in careers, or just you realize, actually I can do this. And fear isn't real. We can't touch fear. But sometimes fear can hold us back, and that there could be many missed opportunities if we let fear be in the driving seat.
No, exactly. And there's, I think it was, I believe it or not, I think it was Miley Cyrus that mentioned that, she's always fearful when she's on stage, but despite the fear, she does it, right? That's the difference of being able to achieve your goal versus not is, and sometimes you'd be surprised, like the most successful people in the world, they get fearful when they're on stage. They get fearful when they're doing things as well. You don't see it, because despite the fear, they still go on with it and do what they need to do.
And here's the thing, then we judge our own inner state with someone's outer. So we'll see a Miley Cyrus on stage and be like, oh my God, she's so confident. She's so owning herself and her body and her voice. No one sees that inner voice before she goes on stage or the day before. And yet we'll compare our inner, our fear, our vulnerabilities with her outer. And it's not a fair comparison.
Agreed. Okay, so let's go to the next one, which is communication quotient.
Well, I was curious around, what do you think about likability? Because it's such an interesting, and I want to come back to communication, but I'm like, what do you think about the likability piece? Like, how important, I suppose, firstly, my question to you, how important is it you've got your teams of people, we've had teams of people for many years. How important is being liked to you? And what part do you think likability plays in impactful leadership?
Yeah, I think great leaders, even though they could be tough, right? You just kind of like them. Like one example I can think of is, I'm not sure you know Eric Maldonado, right?
Yes, I do.
Eric since retired, but Eric is one individual that no matter who you talk to, they love the guy, right? Even people that he just gave a bad ripping to and say, you haven't done this right, you got to fix this. Like, well, I love Eric. And when I think about what's the core to Eric's likability, is he understands the give, get, rule. He's always giving, he's always in whatever situation he's in, you become the most important, interesting person to him, right? And he also always comes across as authentic. And so the key to likability, I think, is really about making sure you do the right thing by others, being your authentic self. And then what's more fun is to focus on doing the right thing. Because if you focus on doing the right thing, even though it's a tough thing to do, over time, that's when you increase your likability. And one of the things I preach a lot to my team is, look, this hour, this day, this week, you may not like me, you may not find me valuable, but in the next month, next quarter, next year, you're going to see the value I bring and what I do, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of times with leaders, it's about making those tough decisions, even though short term, and people may not like the outcome, they may not enjoy what's going on, but because you have that clarity as a leader and you understand the why and the intention, you just have to do the tough thing. And a lot of times, leaders, especially those that are new to leadership, they are afraid to do the tough things because, they view as not being liked by doing what they're about to do. And that's short-term signal versus long-term signal, right? You want to make sure that you do the right thing in the long term. And Eric's an example where I think he's got a track record of constantly doing the right thing in the long term, that anyone that talks is like, I love Eric. He's amazing.
Do you know, we should get him on the show one day, because again, I think to explore the likability quotient, how you can be likable, be successful, make the tough decisions, be the person, even if he has to let you go, you're still like, I love Eric. Because there is something to be said about that, because you don't want to be the pushover. So it's somebody who can balance that likability, but equally being a leader, and there is a responsibility to the seat. It is making the tough decisions. It is making calls that not everyone's going to like. So I think there's something even more to explore with that, because we all spend so much time at work with people at work. You fundamentally, if you like the person, it's going to make the process a lot more enjoyable. And I think it brings out the best in people.
It does. It definitely does. Because, you've seen leaders who say, hey, I'll do anything for this individual. That's why I'm working so hard. I want this individual to be successful, right?
Yeah.
And you see like, wow, that's a great leader. I'll go to a burning building for this person.
Do you not think there's a difference between and like leadership and followership? So leadership, I think there's many great leaders, but followership is that I will take the hill for this person. There's something there. I'm on this in this company because of them. I believe them, the way they show up. extol the values of the organization, there's something there about followership which you can't demand it. It has to be commanded by how people experience you. It's earned.
Yeah, it's how you show up, right? It's your attitude, it's everything, right? It's how you show up.
Yeah, clearly Eric's then got all these cues mastered. So like he's got the AQ, the LQ, the CQ, so he's A* plus on all of these.
No, he is indeed.
Yeah. So okay. So so how important is it then being liked to you? So like, if someone didn't like you as a leader, how would you feel about that?
One of the things I've learned is I'm not everyone's cup of tea. So I don't wake up trying to get everyone to like me. But I do wake up making sure that I'm fair to everybody, that I do care about people's future life career. But at times, as a leader, you're playing a chessboard, right? And you need to create the balance of making sure the board is intact. And a lot of times you just have to make the tough decision where you need to give up a piece on the board to really make sure everyone else thrive. Then you have to make that tough decision. Even at times, if that decision even on your own, right? Like I've had in situations where I penalize myself for the greater good of the team. And so a lot of it is not about focusing on likability, but focusing on the tenets of doing the right thing. And in a way, by doing that, people actually over time will like you because they respect you, understand your fairness, and you're here to do the right thing when no one's watching.
Yeah.
So to me, it's always about focusing on doing the right thing when no one's watching. And when someone's watching, do the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Right.
I love that.
Even if it's a tough decision.
And I love what you said around I'm not everyone's cup of tea, because I thought my younger son really loves tea, and there's everything from your Earl Greys to your English breakfast to your Sam's to your Celion. Well, again, Celion, I don't know how to pronounce it. Well, again, there's so many different teas, and we'll all gravitate to what we enjoy drinking. And actually, I think there's a myth that we can't be liked by everyone. I don't like everyone. I'm sure you don't like everyone. So therefore, not everyone's going to like us. But it's finding your tribe, whether it's friendships, whether it's people who work for you, where there is that LQ, that likability quotient is present.
It is, but I also think an important look. I've seen this happen where, and I'm not sure if you experience this. I've seen two amazing leaders, and I get along with them really well individually, but for some reason they don't like each other. And I know they're great, amazing people, but I'm like, why is there always friction between these two individuals? They're great people, they're amazing. I love them both individually. So is there something wrong, right? And I think a lot of times is, as leader, the key for us is also about being able to work with people that we may not like on a personal level, individualized level, because there could be instances where it could be things about us that we don't realize, our pet peeve, that can get on the nerves. And so I go back to that assume positive intent, right? Is I tend to focus on, okay, this individual, with what they're trying to do, is it coming from an assume positive intent where they're here for the situation, and there just seems to be a blind spot that I haven't seen. Because to your point, we all have blind spots, right? And I think that's important, because at times one of the biggest struggle we have is not dealing with people we don't like. And at times where it's like, maybe it's both, maybe there's something in the chemistry that's not working, but we both individually are adding value. We're trying to do the right thing, right? But we just don't see it.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because I've been in organizations where people on paper you think they'd get on fabulously well, and you think in a different scenario, if they were in different organizations, I'm sure that they met socially, they'd be the bestest of friends. And yet, like it's just sometimes the chemistry doesn't work. So it's either what you don't have to like each other. You can find a way to work each other. And it can be very constructive, and maybe sometimes that rub and that tension, it can actually be a recipe to bring out the best in others. It's if it starts to be destructive, that's when it's unhelpful. But it's sometimes So I think as I listen to you, I've kind of rethought. You don't have to have LQ. It's ideal. And there are plenty of examples where it's probably not present in bounds, but it still isn't impacting the business in a negative way. It works.
Yeah, so I actually have an example where I took over a sizable business, and as part of that, one of the senior members of that team, I didn't like that individual. I'm not gonna say who, but I was like, there's something not right. I don't like the individual. But as I see, that person operate, I respect their capability. I respect what they bring to the table. And so as part of that, I put that individual on my leadership team, even though for some apparent reason, I didn't like that individual. And I asked the question, is it me or is it that individual? I'm not going to say he or she, just to keep this generic. But as we start working together, I realized it was just the tone of how this individual communicate. It's just not similar to my upbringing. And the issue was I wasn't as open-minded, right? And so I now learned a different style of how people can communicate and talk and joke around. And now we're extremely close, right? Like this person is like very close part-minded work. We love each other. And the reality at times is, we tend to judge likability by similarity. And when we see different, that could drive our likability flavor. And what I've tried to do better, and look, it's not easy, right? It's easy to say, it's not easy to do. I try to do better to differentiate my personal taste, my personal belief, my personal habits to core values. As long as they have core values, as long as they align with and they have assumed positive intent in what they do, it doesn't matter if I don't like them in the sense of my personal taste. I'm not sure if that makes sense.
No, it does, because it's interesting where our biases can come in. Subconsciously, we're not always aware that we can be biased in terms of gravitating to people that look like us, sound like us. But as human beings, many of us do that. And the challenge there is, the consequences that you can end up in an echo chamber. If you're a leadership team, everyone looks and sounds like you. It's your ideas that are just coming straight back at you. And hence when we look at the leaders or leadership teams, it is about having that diversity of thinking, diversity of perspective, cognitive, not just diversity of gender and race, but diversity on so many different levels to make sure that you're seeing things like a whole view of something rather than just a segmented view. So it perfectly made sense what you were sharing. And I think it's, as human beings, it's that accusation audit I shared earlier, really holding the mirror up. Am I leading with bias here? Am I, you use the word open, am I being open enough in terms of how I'm seeing this person? Because when we truly hold the mirror up, and sometimes we can be very good with that self-truth, that self-insight. Other times we need somebody, like a coach, a friend, or an advisor or something to help us, just to really, to take a step back, to really, take a step back to, how are we really looking at this person or the situation?
That's right. And with that, I actually like to add diversity quotient onto that list, right? And what I mean by that is, look, my view is, look, we're in the game of innovation. So how do you innovate? To innovate, you need to come up with a lot of different ideas.
Yeah.
Well, how do you get ideas? You get ideas by having diverse perspective. How do you get diverse perspective? Well, you need a diverse group of people with different upbringing, background, way of doing things. And so to me, diversity, that's the driver for innovation, right? Let's not talk race, age, sex, whatever the case is. It's just around perspective, experience, and how people go about solving solutions and situations. And it's really about building these diverse mindsets. And I do think there's inherent skill set to say, even though I have an opposite view of what you're thinking, I want to learn your perspective. So now I can grow, right? It's about, hey, I may believe in one religion, but why not learn about other religions to see their perspective? Because if you think about it, between an atheist and a Christian, the only difference is the Christian have one more belief than the atheist, because there's 3,000 plus religion, right? And so having that diversity of thought to me is an important quotient.
I don't have this with me because I'm on holiday at the moment. But I always have a beach ball that's placed by my desk. You know, the beach ball you had when you were a child, where it had all the different segments: the blue, the green, the orange, the red. And I use the beach ball a lot in the leadership coaching I do, because you know we hold the beach ball, especially when there's a difference of opinion. And I hold the beach ball up and I'd be like, okay, Kiet, so I'm holding this beach ball. As you're looking at it, what color is the beach ball? And you might see red and green. I'm like, okay, well, my beach ball's blue and orange. Now, you and I are equally right and we're equally wrong, because we're both looking at that ball from a really close perspective, and we've got our own knowledge and insight to base it on. But actually, when you step back and you start walking around the ball, that's where you see, okay, well, I've missed the yellow, the purple, the green. And it's that importance of being curious. And sometimes it's ourselves asking those questions. And equally, it's having other people that can enrich us with their knowledge and their perspective. But you have to really want to hear perspective, because some people lead with, you know, I'm really curious, but that is not reflective in how they listen. They'll be like, oh, Kiet, tell me, you know, what your opinion is. I want to hear it. But they're not really interested. They're, you know, whereas when someone truly listens and they're truly curious, it's interesting then where, you know, you talk about that innovation, you know, where innovation might have gone here, but it suddenly goes here because you catalyzed each other. You're thinking, dreaming bigger in ways you could never have imagined.
No, that's exactly it. And look, there's a reason why you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, right? You got to listen more and talk less.
It's so, but how often do you see people? And I wrote a post a while ago, and it was called "Don't Be the Chatterbox," and it was really interesting because a very, very senior CEO from the industry messaged me. She goes, "Oh my God, this is me." But I think it's interesting because where that chatterbox comes from. Because some people, it's just the listening to reload. What I see with a lot of executives is the reason they do it is they're so smart. They're already 2-3 steps ahead. So they're like, well, look, why are we going here when I could just shortcut us to over there to step 3? But it's sometimes you need people to feel heard and seen and their perspective acknowledged. Even if you end up at the same result, but I need to slow it down. I need to use the 2 ears, 1 mouth in order to enroll people, that people feel part of the why that we spoke to earlier.
No, but also in order to help your team from knowing, they may know it because you said it, but they don't quite understand it. And so it's going to take them time to understand it. And the more, you know, people around your team that understand, that aligns with the why, like the more effective as a team will be, right? Because my personal view is a team would be any individual, right? Because team means together, everyone achieves more. That to me
I like
is team,
that.
right? And I do think a lot of times where we fall, look, I fall for the trap as well, right? Like, you know, you do see things 3 steps ahead and you think, okay, let's get going. But you don't realize, well, you're 3 steps ahead mentally, but your entire team is 3 steps behind you.
Yeah.
And they may know what you want them to do, but do they really understand it? And it's really about helping them along the way. And sometimes slower will get you faster.
It's so true. It's the arrow analogy. You know, when you pull an arrow back, you know, it's pulling it back. It feels like you're going backwards, you're going slower, but then on the release of it, it's got the direction, you know, the target, you know where you're heading, and it's got speed. And I think it's that counterintuitive truth. People think you need to go fast, and it's like, no, slowing down actually can avoid mistakes. It can mean you're driving with more purpose and meaning. And so but I think it takes intentionality to slow down to go faster.
Agreed. Okay, so back to communication quotient, the last one. What is your tip on that?
Yeah, I think communication has never been more important. We're bombarded with so much information and messaging. But I think as if I look at leaders in today's world, I speak to them about being, you've got to be transparent. Transparency is equity. And you've got to be the CRO, the chief reinforcement officer. Whatever the mission is, whatever the vision, like you've got to keep, it can't be at one town hall and you do it and it's done. Like, people experience and process information in different ways. So you've got to be the CRO, got to keep reinforcing the messaging, open with your communication, clear with your messaging. Brevity is king. I think, otherwise people are trying to, again, process so much information. So the briefer you can get it, the more people are going to be like, okay, these are the things I need to take away. So brevity, transparency, repetition.
I think that's right on, right? I think it's a way. It's like running for office. Like, what is your platform and what is your messaging, right? And your platform messaging needs to be clear, concise, but you need to keep saying it. And that's why a lot of times you hear politicians keep saying the same thing. It's that sense, right? I'm not saying be a politician, because there are other things we need to think about, but just in general around communication as this is your platform, right? This is what does this platform mean to you? How does this define you, and what is your messaging as part of this platform? Whatever role we're in, whatever seniority we're in, there's always a platform.
Yeah.
Right. And communicating is really about packaging the key components and messaging that out as part of your platform.
Yeah.
So
it's so critical, communication. It's and also checking in for alignment. I think there are times where we can share a message and we know what the intent, we know the core message we wanted to get out there. But is that aligned with how people have interpreted the message? Because sometimes there can be a complete mismatch, and then people are off doing different things that you hadn't wanted them to do. So checking in for alignment with key messages as well, to ensure it's landed in the way that you had intended, is important.
Agreed. Well, Georgie, that was great. I always wonder, how are we going to last 40, 50 minutes not knowing what we're going to talk about? We always just talk a lot about great stuff and insights. I just love these conversations. I learn a lot every time I talk to you, and I'm sure the audience learns a lot, and I just love the dynamic.
I do. And I'm always writing notes, and I love the fact the DQ, so we're going to add the diversity quotient. And I love the point, being okay with it. I'm not everyone's cup of tea, the LQ. And I think there's an acceptance to that. As leaders, you also share, it's about doing things in the right way and doing things when no one's watching. So I took away many great insights. And I think if I circle back to the beginning of what you shared, it is, success is strongly influenced by attention and intention and action, that AIA that you referenced. And I think even if we carved out 5-10 minutes a day to really give thought to our AIAs, game changer, completely will shift the future for you in very profound ways.
Agreed. On that note, thank you everyone for your continued support. Hopefully the next one, when you talk to us, we will have a guest on here to talk about their career, leadership, the choices, changes, and changes they've made in their life. And till then, have a good week, everybody. Thank you, Georgie.
Thank you, Kiet.